everyone, my name is Brandy and I'm the owner and artist behind Brush by Brandy, and this week we're going to be working on this piece that's behind me. And a lot of times, a lot of my pieces will start with a product that I want to use, and that was exactly the case here. Is I saw the new release of papers from Mint by Michelle and I fell in love with this one. I love the scale of the floral. I love the colors that are in this. They're nice and soft and right up my alley. And so finding a product that you love and then pulling your color inspiration out of that product, in this case this decoupage paper, can be a great place to start on a furniture piece. It can give you inspiration when you're a little bit unsure of where to start, and your inspiration can come from a product, it can come from a piece of artwork, it can come from linens or a pillow, or anything that you find that you love can really be a jumping off point for a furniture piece. So don't hesitate to look to your products and pull all your inspiration from there, all your colors and everything. You can usually find that as a great jumping off point when you're a little stuck and unsure on how to proceed with your furniture piece. So this week we are going to be putting together this piece that's actually a vanity. It's got a mirror also that goes with it. We're going to be doing some decoupage, a beautiful paint blend that pulls all these colors out. There's a little bit of a wood stain top. We're going to paint on a mirror. So there's a whole bunch of techniques in this one, and I think you guys are going to love how this one comes together. Let's get started. Here's where I started on this piece, and I actually picked this one up at a local estate sale, and it was just a desk on its own. So I found this mirror, and I'm going to put them together and use cohesive finishes to make a set out of them and create a vanity. I started this piece much like I start all of my pieces, in removing all of the hardware and putting them out to be cleaned, cleaning the piece thoroughly, and then I added 2 coats of Wise-All primer in light gray, and that started out as my base. I didn't have a clear image of the color scheme that I wanted to use, so I actually started out with the sage green on the bottom of that one, but you're going to see that this color scheme changes. But that's what this first coat does. It gives me a time to conceptualize, see how I like the layout of the colors, and whether that's going to work in the long run. So this is my first coat with a sage green on the bottom, going up to a lighter pink and then a white highlight in the center, and it just wasn't the look that I wanted. I do like these colors together, so I'm going to save this look for another piece and come back to it with my second coat, and I'm going to correct the color scheme that I'm going to use on this one. For this piece, I'm going to be using a decoupage paper from Mint by Michelle, and I'll show you that paper just a little bit later in the video, but let's go ahead and get my actual color scheme laid onto this piece. I started up at the top with this creamy off-white color. This is Woolen Jumper from Mint by Michelle paint, and I really love how her paint goes on. The color that I actually found that surprised me the most is her black, and it's one of the most saturated, rich blacks. It's a true black, which is actually kind of rare. Some blacks can lean a little bit blue or a little bit purple, but hers was actually very rich and very saturated, so I was super impressed by the black. So up at the top, I used this Woolen Jumper color, and then I'm going to blend it into this mauve. And again, I'm pulling my color inspiration from that paper, and this color was kind of a surprise to me, but it actually ends up tying in with the paper just perfectly. This color is called Stoneware Clay, and once I've got these 2 colors laid onto the surface, I'm going to use my B10 brush from Klingon and work these 2 colors together so I have a nice smooth transition. I'm sort of going to go from a light to a dark on this one with the Woolen Jumper and then the Stoneware Clay, and then that black called Time and Space will be down at the bottom. Going from the Stoneware Clay into that pure saturated black was kind of a challenging blend. It's a very dark color, and so this one you'll just want to take your time and make sure you blend on. I liked it just down at the bottom, just enough to highlight those legs, but it is also going to tie in with some of the black shades that are in the paper. I'm going to turn this piece around and repeat this blend all the way around the back side of the piece. This blend was all done live on camera, so if you want to see the longer unedited version in real time, you can catch this live video up now also on my YouTube channel. But for this edited tutorial, I'm going to throw on some music, and you can go ahead and watch this process repeat around the back side of this desk. I also want to note that I don't usually paint the back sides of my pieces, but this back was finished with a factory finish, and so I usually try to take my cues from the manufacturer and repeat my finishes where they did the original finishes on the piece. So I told you on this one we're going to be using a decoupage paper from Mint by Michelle, and this was part of a collection that was just released, and here was all of the papers that were released in this collection. Can you look at them and guess which one I intend to use on this furniture piece? They were all beautiful, but there was one that jumped out to me initially. I just loved the colors in it and the overall design, but I'm going to save the rest of these papers and use them on future pieces for sure. Now that I've chosen which paper I'm going to use, you guys will see my choice in just a little bit. I'm going to get started on putting it on the front of these drawers. I started out by using Mint by Michelle primer, and the reason I'm going to go ahead and use this is because it's a nice pure white primer. White is great to use under decoupage papers because it's going to give me the most rich and saturated colors out of that paper. I had started the body of this piece using a gray primer, but I'm going back over this with white just so that I can get the colors out of my decoupage, although the rest of the body I went ahead and left the gray. I could have left the gray on the front of these drawers also, but it would have just left a gray undertone to my paper and kind of dulled the colors, and I didn't want to do that. Once I have my primer on and nice and dry and I've got that pure white base, I'm going to go ahead and start laying my paper on the front of this. And I'm going to start out by showing you actually on this little curved section of molding. I start out by laying on some wallpaper paste. I really like laying Mint by Michelle papers using wallpaper paste. This is Roman brand 543 paste, and I get it from my local Lowe's store. And then I just cut a strip of my paper. I made sure that my pattern lined up, and I cut the pieces individually. And then I'm going to wet it ever so slightly using my mister bottle. A little bit of water on the back of the paper adds a little bit of stretch into these papers, and you will be shocked how stretchy the Mint by Michelle papers are. And I'm just going to use my fingers and very gently start laying this paper into these curves. Now I'm going to be careful to not create a lot of rubbing and friction over the top, so I'm using a dry brush, and this is just going to be a little more gentle on the paper than my fingers will be. I can reposition the paper. That's part of why I like using the wallpaper paste, because it has a nice long open time. So I'm allowed to reposition the paper here as I need to and get it laid into place, and then use that brush to push it into those curves. I had cut these pieces to just about size, but once I added the water and got a little bit of stretch out of the paper, I had a little excess piece over at the edge. So using a really sharp razor knife and being really careful to not tear that edge, I'm just going to remove the little edge of the paper that was hanging off and then use my brush to press that into place. And then I used my fingers to go ahead and wrap this around the top, and I'm smoothing it out ever so slightly, and then I'm going to leave this to dry. While that piece is drying, let's go ahead and pay attention to some of these drawer fronts. And I have to admit the fronts were much easier to do than some of that curved molding. So that was actually the hardest part of this project. Now I'm going to brush on some of my Roman brand 543 wallpaper paste onto the front of this drawer, right over that white primer. And then I've got my pre-cut piece of paper. And these are pre-cut so the pattern lines up from each drawer to the next. I'm adding that little mist of water to the back of my paper. That's going to help it stretch a little bit. And then I find a 90-degree corner to start with. Now you'll notice on this, I'm rolling it from side to side. And that's because of the barrel roll of these drawers. If I tried to lay it from top to bottom, it would be much harder to stretch it. I can reposition the paper slightly as needed to make sure that I cover it, and then I'm using the wrapper from the Mint by Michelle paper itself and one of her decoupage tools to work out any wrinkles in that. Now you guys will be shocked, but the results on this are fabulous. I had no wrinkles in this paper whatsoever. So using that plastic and just rubbing it over with the decoupage tool gets you a super smooth surface. I'm pressing all of that wallpaper paste out to the edges, and I'm trying to not touch the front of my paper with any of the plastic that has any of the paste on it. If you need to, you can replace and use a clean piece of plastic, but you want to try to keep that wallpaper paste from getting onto the front. All right, I've got one drawer done. Let's go ahead and repeat this on another one, and then I did this for each drawer going down the line. Here's an up close of that end result. You guys, there is not a wrinkle in this. It's actually one of my favorite applications to date. Look at how that pattern lines up. It came out beautifully and I love this paper. So I actually ended up making a mistake and I primed the top of this piece, but later I decided that instead of painting it, I wanted to give it a wood stain finish. So lucky me, I get to go back and sand off all the primer from this wood top. I'm just using an 80 grit paper on my Surf Prep sander and I'm going over it, and I have to remove all of that primer but also the existing finish that was underneath to get down to the raw wood. From my 80 grit, I moved on to a 120 and then a 220, and now I'm going to add some Minwax stain. This is Minwax stain, and this color is called Jacobian. I ended up using about 3 layers of this to get the nice, dark, saturated color that I wanted on this wood. The first coat took really well. It had really pretty grain in this, but I wanted to pull out some of the darker tones that are in the paper on the front, and I didn't want this overall kind of orangey color, so I wanted it to be really, really dark. That's the nice thing about stains, is you can layer them until you get the coverage and color that you want. The paint on my body is done. I've got a beautifully stained top and my papered front, and now I want to go ahead and add my clear coat. So I'm going to spray this with 2 coats of Wysal matte varnish, just using my paint sprayer. This is going to give me a beautiful low sheen and protect all of the finishes on this piece. Here is the end result on this one. I absolutely love how it turned out. This mirror matches perfectly. You can't even tell that they weren't an original set once I painted them in the same finishes. What do you guys think? I hope you enjoyed this process. I added back my original existing hardware and took some photos just using a stool I had in my storage and a vase of flowers. You guys can find links for everything I used in the description for this post. You can find more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com. And don't forget to click that subscribe button for weekly painting tutorials here at Brush by Brandy on YouTube.